Murder from mental health. A change in Department of Child Safety legislation. My 8-year-old brother. My story. Hello everyone. Welcome to Signpost for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter. It's a bit of happy music for not a very happy intro. Do you agree?
Yes, it is. Very happy music.
It's quite a clash of what we're talking about. Everyone, we have got gorgeous Chantelle here. Chantelle Deetlefs, is that right?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, you're welcome.
Really appreciate it. Now, Chantelle and I have had a very brief talk, and so this is all fresh for me as well, and I've purposely kept it that way, so that we can explore the story, your story.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, this is something that happened historically, and it's going to be really interesting to talk about what happened historically all the way through to the present day. So this happened when you were 18 years old, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how old are you now?
60.
60. So it's probably a good time to talk about it.
That went quick.
Did it really?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me, you were. I mean, let's just dive straight in.
Okay.
Can you tell me the story of your family and what happened? Because this is actually a story that's known in the media. If you look up your brother's name, Paul Montcalm.
Montcalm.
Montcalm. Montcalm.
Yes.
So it's known in the media.
Yeah.
And now we're actually, it's going to be good for all of the misinformation that's out there to actually, get the facts right. I think that's an important thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So do you mind telling me a little bit about the family? Who was at home when this was all happening?
I was living out of home.
Were you?
Had been for a couple of years at this point.
So when you left 16, you left home?
Yeah, it was a forced situation. It was a survival situation. My mother's mental health issues had become so bad, I guess you could call it. She wasn't diagnosed until the event.
Did you know she had a mental health diagnosis that was quite significant, or did you think it was more a personality type issue?
I had no idea.
Yeah, just
I truly had no idea. I had known my mother my whole life, and so I didn't know.
No.
I had
and you were
no
a child,
idea.
you were a teenager.
Yeah, and the local kids used to call her the witch, and I mean they could look in, I guess, through the window and see a weirdo or somebody different, or there was something wrong, but mental health wasn't really spoken about.
No, not
And
at all.
her father would have periods of what I now know to be PTSD.
Yeah.
Because he was a career armyman, and he'd been through quite a lot back in the Second World War and
So
what
she
have you.
grew up with a father with PTSD.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And he would lock himself in the lounge room in the front of the house, and you kept away from Grandad, because I lived with my grandparents when I landed in Australia. I was born in South Africa.
How old were you when you came to Australia?
Almost 5. I arrived here in the November before my 5th birthday.
Sure.
Which is in January.
So were your grandparents living with you all the way through to when you were 16 and you...
No.
No.
No, I went to live with them.
Oh, okay.
From South Africa. And my mother was married to my father, so my grandfather, being Irish and very, well, we call it old-fashioned now, but whatever. My mother had found herself a new boyfriend. She was still married to my father. My grandfather said, out, leave your daughter here because you don't know how to raise a child.
Mm-hmm.
And she got a job in Sydney. Grandparents were in Wollongong, and so I lived with them.
So that's what, 2 hours away, would you say?
Yeah, forever by train, especially then. But an hour and a half's drive.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Today, probably 2 hours, depending on where you're going. She lived in the inner city.
So we'll come back a bit, but so you were 16, you moved out, and then did you have contact with her from when you were 16 to 18?
I attempted a few contacts with her.
Yeah.
They were terrible.
What would happen?
Well, I'd ring her and be sworn at and abused and told to come home, and I tried negotiating over the phone with her about coming back home. I said, I'll come back home, but I'm not allowing you to physically beat me. I'm not being abused anymore.
So
I've had enough.
She used to physically beat you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, regularly.
And you had a brother?
Yep.
Who was 10 years younger than you?
Yes.
So he would have been 6 when you moved out?
Yes.
And was he physically beaten as well?
I used to stand between them.
Right.
But I had decided that my mother had a bottomless pit of anger and violence. And so when I left, and my life was being threatened on a daily basis at this point, to the point where I couldn't sleep properly because she was creeping around my bedroom over night time, I knew he would have to bear the brunt of what I had been getting. So I used to be able to stand between them. I wouldn't be able to do that anymore. But I was going to die, and that's all there was to it.
So if you stayed, you just knew you were
going to die. Yeah.
She had this predatory quality to her.
Absolutely, yep.
Was she ever delusional with you at that point? Very bizarre in her belief system? Or
yes.
Did it? Yeah, she was?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
She made up a character called Uncle Benjamin. The arson squad informed me of that. Was there an Uncle Benjamin in your family? And I said, well, I can ask, but I've never heard of him. Apparently she could see him.
Right. So she's having visual hallucinations at that point.
Yeah. So
we're talking schizophrenia type symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So
in the Court of Petty Sessions lasted a millisecond, or it seemed like it.
The what sessions?
Court of Petty Sessions.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when she murdered him, she had to go to the court. The first port of call in court was the Court of Petty Sessions. So she goes to court and they say, right, these are the charges you're up on. What do you say for yourself? And she says whether or not she's innocent or guilty. Does she have... So the charges are read out.
Yeah.
And the judge then decides what happens then.
Yeah.
So he said she's going for an evaluation.
Right.
Down comes the gavel. See you later.
Yep. Straight into the mental health category.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Straight away.
Absolutely.
And it was over in a flash. He'd obviously spoken to her or recognised something or whatever, but...
So you got flagged in court?
Oh, yeah.
So there you were, you were 16, you had to leave because you had a sense, you knew that you were going to get killed by her, you'd be killed by her, so you had to leave. It would have been horrible having to leave your brother there.
It was.
And your grandparents couldn't have him because he wasn't biologically their grandchild?
No, he was.
He was?
Yeah.
Oh, so they were her parents. Your grandparents were her parents.
Her parents.
Why didn't they grab him? Sorry.
My grandfather. Yeah, no. I asked myself all these questions many, many years ago. I asked them these questions.
Oof.
And my grandfather wasn't well.
Yeah.
But his moral standing was that my brother didn't exist because my mother was not supposed to divorce my father. Once you get married, that's it. You're married. End of story.
Oh, gosh.
So we don't want to see him. He doesn't exist.
So he was illegitimate in his eyes?
Yeah, well, he didn't exist. He said he doesn't exist.
That's the gist.
Yes.
Oh, that's just archaic. I'm sorry to disrespect your grandfather that way.
Yeah, it is.
That's horrendous.
He had a lot of good qualities, but that wasn't one of them.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. So he basically didn't value your brother?
Not at all.
Oof. Right. So how hard was it? Was it those 2 years knowing your brother was there and you were not? Or did you just 16 and the 16-year-olds, one protective factor is they can go and get consumed in their own life. Did you do that? Did you go be a typical 16-year-old?
No, not really.
No.
You have to work to pay for things. Everything's very serious. There's no fun. You're very well aware that you're a nobody at 16 because you can't vote. You're not entitled to anything. You can't get your own birth certificate. You can't make your own decisions. You can't do anything. You're in a void. So I couldn't afford to educate myself to get a better job. Education was during the day, so I would have had to live on nothing. I wasn't entitled to anything unless my mother said I could have it, because I couldn't get my birth certificate. I couldn't get my birth certificate without my mother's permission. That was never going to happen. I was 17 when I begged my grandparents to get me a birth certificate because it's coming from South Africa.
Mm.
That's when I found out they had my father's phone number.
Mm-hmm.
So they paid for it and filled out the forms because I just flat out did not have enough money left after a week's work to pay for anything.
So your grandparents didn't pay for your living?
No.
Okay.
They wouldn't. I said, can I come and live with you and do my education, finish my education, because I didn't want to not finish my education at that point. And they said no. So I asked my uncle, which was my mother's brother, and he said no. They all said no.
I'm sorry, but that's pretty pathetic. If a kid wants an education...
Sure.
Yeah. Whoa.
But it was on my mother's say-so.
Yeah. Oh, darling, that's tough.
Yep.
That's tough. And can I say most kids in a normal environment don't need to have all of that independence till they're 18 because the parent is caring for them, but you didn't have that by any stretch.
No.
So it was a really tough time getting through, finding a way in the adult world when you weren't given the rights of an adult.
Yes.
Basically.
So you're in a void.
You're in a void, yeah.
Yeah. For 2 years you're in a void. You can't walk in a bank and open a bank account because you're not 18. And so your parent still has all this power over you.
Mm. Even when they're not parenting.
Correct.
Or adulting, as the rest of the family were. So tell me what happened when you were 18, when your brother Paul was 8.
I got up in the morning and thought, well, I'll go and grab the newspaper, and because I've always read the paper, and I need some milk, so I'll walk across the road, and I lived in Narrabeen on the
Where's that?
North Shore of Sydney.
Right.
Only one street away from the beach. It was great. And,
no, that's free.
Yeah. And then I had one neighbour and the shop. So off I went to the shop, and outside the shop they had posters for the newspapers. The front page of the newspaper was in a wire cage out the front, and that was advertising the front page of the paper. Boy dies in fire. It's my brother.
Oh, I can't imagine. That's horrendous.
Yeah, it was.
And you knew it was him straight away?
Yeah, absolutely.
Had his name, or you could see the house? Or...
No, his photo.
Oh, really?
Yep.
And that's how you found out?
Yep.
And that's how your grandparents found out?
No, of course not.
What?
Of course not.
They knew?
Yep.
They didn't tell you?
Well, the arson squad got hold of my uncle, my mother's brother, because my mother must have given them some information, and you had the phone books then too. You could just look through and find people's numbers and names and addresses and things. And they got in contact with my uncle. My uncle claimed he didn't know where I was, yet I wrote them a letter every month to tell them that I was doing okay, where I was, what address I had. So he lied.
Again, who's the adult?
Yep. And my grandmother complied with anything that he did, because at this stage my grandfather was dead. He died when I was 17.
Right.
And the arson squad had been... Well, my mother told people that must have been the police, certainly was the arson squad, that I was a 15-year-old and I was in a girls' home.
Total fiction.
Absolute fiction.
Why?
So they'd spent all night looking for me.
Why this desire to hide you?
I don't know, seems a family tradition.
Very weird, hey?
Yep, very strange. So I rang the arson squad.
Okay.
Because it had their names in the paper.
Right.
The arson squad said such and such, so I rang them.
Wow.
I said, listen, I'm his sister. This is where I am. And she'd blamed me.
Sorry?
My mother had blamed me.
How?
She said that I did it.
She blamed you for the fire?
Correct.
Oh, my gosh.
But between me leaving at 16 and turning 18 and her murdering him, she'd moved house, and I had no idea where they were.
Oh, my gosh. That's so malicious to want to blame you. Or do you put that down to the mental health?
Both. She had a horrible personality.
Right.
Mm.
Tell me just a bit about her personality. I mean, obviously she used to hit you and
She's vindictive.
Vindictive.
And we weren't the only ones that were victims of her nastiness.
Because some really beautiful, lovely people can have schizophrenia.
Yeah, one of my good friends is schizophrenic. She's great.
Exactly. And it's really important that people don't think schizophrenia means not a good person or a kind person. It's when someone who's beautiful like you and I, and then suddenly they have an episode where they're psychotic and they're not, of sound mind anymore. So this is your mum who's not that. She had that underlying personality. I'm hearing personality disorder type stuff.
Yes.
And then she had schizophrenia on top. That's a double whammy. That's not a good day. You're not going to have a good day.
No.
Yeah.
No. Somebody said to me years down the track that had lost a family member through horrible circumstances as murder. Don't you just want her to die? And I said, no, not really. I said, I don't get up every morning, and evidently, by the looks of things, neither do you, not even knowing who you are. She does.
Yeah.
So I have some sort of understanding. Can't say I have any forgiveness, but I have some understanding that perhaps if she could have, and this is completely fiction, if she could have had a choice about who she wanted to be and live without mental issues, as many as I would say she had, she probably would have chosen a whole lot different. Life would have been easier for her, wouldn't it?
So that's you speaking with understanding and compassion for the role of her mental disorder on her behaviour and her quality of life, and how much she was very much at the mercy of a lot of that.
She was, I think, tormented.
Well, she would have been tormented. What a horrible life.
Yeah.
You can't be content or happy when you've got either of those.
No.
I think that's pretty profound of you to have that capacity.
No, thanks.
I'm just saying. Yeah. So, okay. So what happened? So you called the fire squad, and what happened? How did that play out from there?
Oh, well, they took me down into the dungeons of the police station. I can't remember which one. It was in the inner city.
In Sydney somewhere.
Yeah, and it was cold and horrible. I think it was just cold because I don't know, I was numb at this point. And they asked me
you
how
were probably in shock.
Yeah,
You're probably shaking and cold, probably.
Yeah, probably. They asked me a whole lot of questions. They sat a chair about 6 or 7 probably feet, about 3 metres away from the back of me. And they kept looking at it. I kept turning around to see if there was anybody there. And I'm looking at them thinking, this chair's empty, dude. Like,
are you seeing something?
Yeah, what's going on here?
That would actually be very unsettling.
Do you know anything about Uncle Benjamin? I said, well, no, but I could always, I don't know, find out. I'll ask someone. I have no idea. And I thought, that's strange. And they asked me quite a few strange questions. And I walked out of there going, right. I'm none the wiser. And I'm really confused. So then I toddle off to the hospital where she's got smoke inhalation. And
so she was was it intended as a murder-suicide?
No.
Okay. So tell me.
She was pretending. She was pretending somebody else had lit the fire and she'd been suffering. She'd escaped the house out a window. And if you'd have jumped out that window, you'd have jumped straight through the clothesline, which was intact.
Right.
So, and it was a second-story window. She would have been damaged in some way. She wasn't damaged at all. She was fine. And so she was doing one of her, what I used to call acting jobs, laying in bed, pretending to have smoke inhalation. And
So she didn't have smoke inhalation at all?
no, she was just full of it.
Yeah.
So I said to her, she said, "Oh, who are you?" I said, "You know damn well who I am. And I know damn well who you are." And I said, "And if I have to get out the paperwork and waste, because there's 2 police women there, and waste these people's time, and you're wasting taxpayers' money," I said, you're only delaying yourself a couple of days. That's all. And I shouldn't have to pull out paperwork because you know damn well who I am." And she sort of, I had never spoken to her quite this manner before.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen her in probably 18 months.
Yeah.
It was the last time I saw them, or probably close to 2 years at that point.
Did you know she had, at this point, did you presume or know that she had killed him?
She was always threatening to.
So you were presuming.
Oh, yeah.
So you would have been really angry at her.
Oh,
How
yeah.
dare you kill my brother?
Yeah, I hung on to the bars at the end of the bed.
So there's fury in you as you're speaking.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, it was wild. And when she pretended she didn't know who I was, I gave it to her straight, you know. And because
As in, how dare you kill my brother?
yeah, I said, "Why'd you do it?
Right.
Why?"
Mm.
Had I not said that, apparently, I wouldn't have had to have gone to the coroner's court. So we spent an eternity, and it felt like an eternity, in coroner's court, where she continued to try to blame me. I didn't even know where they lived. And the magistrate just pulled everybody up to the bench and said, "She didn't do it. You need to stop."
As in, you didn't do it?
Yeah. Your argument's ridiculous. And then they all started speaking illegalese, and I couldn't understand a word they were saying. But then I was told I could go. So I sat up the back and watched and listened for a little while. And my mother had a public solicitor, a lawyer, whatever you want to call him. And he was terrified.
Who was
very young.
Oh, right. Vic Green.
And yeah, he was very young, and her mental issues weren't under control, and you could see that.
Did she seem really disorganised and chaotic in the...
She wasn't chaotic. She'd now decided that she was on the bent that my brother's father, Stephen, had done it, or I had done it, and that he used to beat her. And that it was pretty confusing, because she kept bringing it, no matter what anybody said, she kept bringing this back, the conversation, if you can call it a conversation, back to, "But he beat me." And she wanted him to admit that he used her as a punching bag, which he did.
So she's off on a tangent over here, and they're trying to talk about the fire.
Yeah.
And when you were in hospital and you said, "Why did you do it?" How did she respond in the hospital?
Do what?
Oh, just deny.
Absolute denial.
That would have been infuriating for you.
Oh, she used to do it at home all the time.
Just routinely didn't
It's
admit.
routine, yeah. It's pretty much routine. I knew what she was up to. I knew she was lying.
Yeah.
I knew she was acting.
So the coroner's process didn't come with anything, or...
She kept insisting that he had melanoma, and that she'd been instructed by God to bathe him in bleach and cover him in burn cream, which she did.
Poor darling.
Yeah, it was not good. And the coroner continued, he hasn't got melanoma. He does not have a melanoma. I was at lunch. I went to the cafeteria at Glebe Coroner's Court, and I didn't know how the process worked. I was numb and in shock and trying to understand something, anything. And so I was talking to my brother's father, Stephen, and Noel, his father. So I just don't understand. And because he died in a house fire, he was fairly badly burnt. His remains were badly burnt after he died. Because he would have died of smoke inhalation. The coroner was sitting not far from us. There was a table of coroners. And he said, look, I'll explain it to you.
The coroner at lunch explained it to you?
Yeah.
What did he say?
He said he would have died of smoke inhalation.
Oh, that's hard. But you needed to know.
Yeah.
And that was the first time in a cafeteria from the coroner directly telling you.
Yep.
That just tells me how appalling the process was, not to look after an 18-year-old.
Yep.
Sorry, I cut you off.
But if he had not said anything, I don't know when I would have found out, but it would have been further down the track, because my biggest concern was that he died in lots of pain.
From the fire. From
the fire itself. And of course, not having any experience.
Sure.
How would I know? I didn't know.
Yeah.
It's 1982. People didn't say that you died of smoke inhalation. Nobody said it.
Yeah.
Somebody died in a fire. So my image of somebody dying in a fire was like the witch burnings. Because it wasn't that long ago I was studying history in school.
Oh, that's horrible.
So that was my image of
that was your reference point.
Yeah,
oh, that's
because
horrible.
I was a child. At 18, I was still a child.
Well, whoever that coroner was, thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. And then I'm glad. So did you have support then from your brother's father and his father? Were they okay, complex people again, right?
Well, Stephen did bash my mother half to death, and he was a terrifying personality. He was violent.
So hardly people in your corner.
Oh, hell no.
Okay.
Noel was great, Stephen's father, my brother's grandfather. He was really good. But came attached to him was his son. Stephen terrified me. He terrorised us. He beat us. He put my mother in hospital. He pushed her through a window. I thought that was a dream until, I couldn't tell you, till I was about 42. I drove past the house that we lived in when that happened, and that window was the only aluminium window in the whole house, because Stephen's brother still lived there. It was a family home, and that one window was an aluminium window. They had to have it replaced because he'd pushed her through it.
Oh, that would have been a horrible memory. Cue.
Yeah, but I thought it was a dream. I thought something I'd made up, or something that I wasn't thinking right, because it was such a nightmare. But it happened.
And so, was there an outcome from the coroner's report?
That he died from smoke inhalation.
But not directing the blame to your mother?
This is the funny thing. I kind of zoned out about then. She was found mentally unwell.
Yeah.
And was charged with arson. And did jail time for arson, but not for his death. And I still have to look into that. But I've been a bit busy raising my own family and trying to keep them away from all of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's bizarre, because if you do any kind of criminal act and you've got a mental health explanation, typically you go down the mental health path.
Yes.
And you don't go through the criminal. So you don't normally do one criminal, one mental health. So that is legitimately peculiar. I've never come across it. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
So, typically she would, for both charges, she would go down the mental health path.
Yeah, possibly. Possibly she did.
Yeah.
But I think, just from memory, and it's a bad memory, 3 years, 8 months I think she got. She did 2 years, so many months, I'm pretty sure.
In a mainstream jail?
No, in Silverwater prison, a branch of Malawa prison. She was in there, and I'm pretty sure it was the mental health
All right.
section. She was in a little wing that was
Okay.
more like a house.
So maybe she went directly to the mental health.
I think
high
so.
secure or moderate secure.
Yes.
So that's not mainstream. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that makes
Yeah.
sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. So then what happened from there? So there you are. You know, you would have been in shock. You know, you're grieving the death of your brother. You're processing all that. You know, what happened then? What happened?
Then I went back to the house where it all occurred, even though I'd been told not to. It's best you don't do that. Well, I was going to do it anyway. I found a camera that had been fried by the fire, and that's where I found the last photos of my brother. I took them to a camera shop in Narrabeen, and they were kind enough, I explained the circumstances, and they were kind enough to open it up and save what they could. So I got the last photos of him.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, very. It was, very. They were very kind. They were very nice. And then, I don't know why, but I went upstairs. It was a Department of Housing place in Woolloomooloo. And I went upstairs and I could see where he'd been laying. And all that's a bit gruesome. But it was something that I had to do. I was compelled. Don't know why.
You were probably grasping for understanding,
Yeah.
even though you
Yeah.
were seeing traumatic images.
Yep. Yes. There were a few personal things that I wanted. Things from when I was a child that I wanted that were mine. They were given to me personally. She'd taken from me. And a couple of keepsakes of my brother's, his brush. And a couple of little things, plus the camera. Because now the house is gutted. Spoke to the neighbour who tried to save him. He climbed the veranda. He's the one that reported it to the police. He was sleeping against a common wall, and he rolled over and touched the wall, and it burnt. So he dived out of bed and
Yep. Rushed around.
realised what was going on and rang. That's when they found that this community that they'd created, Department of Housing community they'd created in Woolloomooloo, you couldn't drive up the roads. They'd all been paved for living purposes. You know, your kids could play out there and cars couldn't run them over.
Communal space, yep.
Yep. However, the fire engine couldn't get up there, the police couldn't get up there, nothing could.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that all had to be redone. So that changed.
Yep.
Because they didn't think about that. And so that had delayed anybody getting there. He was already dead. The man next door, who was clearly traumatised, and I'm asking him questions because we're both clearly traumatised, had gone from his veranda to the other veranda, my mother's veranda, and the windows were bulging out.
Oof.
And he was trying to, he could see my brother was dead on the floor, but he found himself compelled to try and save him. And so he was trying to break the windows with whatever was there.
Yeah.
He said it kept bouncing off
Yeah.
the window, and then he did smash the window, and I think he got blown off the veranda or something.
Yeah.
Singed. So that wasn't the best thing.
Did he see your mother at that point?
I don't know. But she was found wandering around out the front of the house.
Not trying to rescue your brother.
Oh, whispering. Paul, open the window. She tied all the windows together so you couldn't open them.
Tied them together.
Tied them together. There was 43, I think it was. It's not an exact number, but around about 43 fires lit with clothing inside the house. So there was no chance that he was ever getting out. There was no chance he was ever getting out.
Far out. And she tied the windows closed.
Tied the windows closed. Which she did when I was at home as well. It was a habit of hers.
What was her rationale back then?
You can't lock the windows, it's not secure, somebody's going to get in.
Yep.
She's extremely paranoid. Yeah, it was...
So Dylan, you've got this trauma that I can't even imagine. And you know, the rawness of that, and how long that would have taken for you to process. And to what degree can you ever fully process that you know there's always going to be that and Department of Child Safety, and it became there was eyes on Department of Child Safety at some point. So when did that happen? When was there a review of this with accountability? Because clearly she went through the mental health pathway with the criminal system, so that's all happening. So what happened with docs? When did the eyes turn to that, and when did you get involved with that? Immediately?
Within days, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, within days. While all this was going on, all that happened within days. I found a letter, several letters, which I'm 60 now, so it's been a long time, that ever since I handed them over. There was a letter written to my mother because she wasn't using enough electricity. She was only paying for the rental part of the electricity. She'd flicked a switch off at the power board, and she'd had a letter sent to her, and my mother was a bit of a drama queen, and she wrote back, as she did, and said that she wasn't going to deal with the secretary, and seeing as it goes along the lines of seeing as the power company was owned by the government, she was only going to speak to a government official. So the secretary or a person is in office, or an assistant, wrote back and rubber stamped Nick Griner's signature on the letter. And she refused to accept that because it wasn't his personal signature.
Wow.
So backwards and forwardsing.
So she's like, how can I milk this for
absolutely.
a bigger audience?
And she was good at that.
Yeah.
She used to write letters to the ABC and then sit and watch the ABC programs, and she'd grab a thesaurus and pick out a word that was very rarely used. And because they were really, her letters were the ravings of a madwoman.
Okay.
As somebody put it at the time.
Yeah.
It'd get passed around by the looks of things, and this word would be used, and she'd wait for that word to be used.
So they'd use her word in the ABC News.
And they'd be laughing. They'd all be having a little bit of a giggle, because it was the rantings of a lunatic. And
oh gosh,
they'd say this word, and then she knew that they'd read the letter, and she was happy then.
She didn't realise they were mocking her.
No, she didn't care. She didn't. No.
Okay. So then she doesn't want a rubber stamp from the top person.
No, she wants the top person. The signature. So she got it. And I handed that letter to, there was a little group of people who lived in the area who'd been affected by this, because in 2 years, and there is a report that if anybody wants to buy it for themselves, they can.
A report that outlines,
that docs had visited 40 times in the last 2 years of my brother's life.
40 times?
40 times.
So let's just go back. First of all, she gets a letter. Am I reading this right? She gets a letter from the Premier talking about her electricity usage.
Yes.
With him signing it, the Premier of New South Wales.
Yes.
One. And then we've got docs coming 40 times in 2 years.
Yes.
So there's eyes on this family.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
All eyes.
Yep.
Yep.
So tell me more. So what happened then with docs?
Well, docs, in the report, it states that docs had ticked all their boxes, not in that wording, and that she was white, educated and clean, and had become accustomed to being poor. So she couldn't possibly be a child abuser.
So this logic is that they're going to have this pigeonhole, this scenario.
Absolutely, they did,
and if you don't fit the pigeonhole, then you're clean. You're not going to be an abuser.
Absolutely, yes.
And
that's exactly how it was.
This scenario exposed the fact that that's complete rubbish.
Absolutely, yep.
Wow. So was there
broke it open.
Yeah. Was
Yeah.
there an inquiry about docs? What happened?
There was a report done, and I believe, without going further into research, and there are blanks in my memory, and I think they're there for a reason, that it was heard in federal parliament. It was certainly heard in state parliament. Some of the people in the report, one of them was a docks worker, and he had, previously to me leaving home, he had been having an affair with my mother from, when I was 10, I caught them in the kitchen, and she would request that he came on his own. She wouldn't allow anybody else to come with him. It got to the point where his wife found out a few years later, and it was a few years down the track. It's been going on for quite some time. And Mr. Spratt, and he had to move. So there was a marriage being saved and what have you. It so happens that he moved to an area where near where my grandparents lived.
Your grandmother?
And grandfather, because he was alive at this point. He didn't die till I was 17. So this was when I was younger.
Oh, this is before. I'm sorry.
This is up to about the age of 14,
Got it.
15.
Got it.
And so back then, docks workers and docks officers, if you had a docks office in one area,
Yep.
They didn't communicate with the docks office in another area,
Mm-hmm.
and you had a docks officer assigned to you,
Mm-hmm.
and that docks officer would take care of your case, and they could do whatever they liked with the paperwork. And he burnt it all. And he admits that.
He burnt the paperwork for you and your brother.
Yes, before he left the office, because that was his right to do. He was allowed to do that. Yeah, it wasn't illegal. That's the way it worked. And so we didn't have a paper trail, because everywhere she went, she made sure she was connected with him until he was moved away and worked for a different department and did something else. And he had burnt all the paperwork. So that paper trail didn't exist.
So here's this docks worker who's supposed to be advocating for you and ensuring that you're in a safe environment, and you come out and him and your mum are getting hooky in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I imagine that just made you lose a lot of faith in authority figures, the
Yeah.
systems, if you had any. Yeah,
Yes.
that's very damaging.
When I was 13, I ran away to a police station to tell them what was going on. And they said, well, your mother's hysterical on the end of the phone at Liverpool Police Station. I was at Enmore. Let me tell you, that's a long walk. She cares about you because she's rung and she wants you home, and you're going home to a good home. I said, but I'm not. She beats me. Well, you must be doing the wrong thing then.
Oh my gosh. That there's any justification for an adult beating a child.
1970s.
Yeah.
That's what people did.
Wow.
And so nobody would listen, because I was an ungrateful child, because I was clean, educated and white.
Yeah. Far out. So I imagine there was a lot of occasions where you tried to, seek attention, seek help.
Definitely.
Respite.
And with proof.
And with proof.
And with proof.
What kind of proof would you?
I had bleeding welts on my back.
Oh my gosh.
And I went to the health teacher, who was also a PE teacher, and I told her, Mrs. Annette, I said, look at me. I've got bleeding welts all down my legs, back of my legs, because she'd only do it to the skirt line.
Yeah.
And the skirt line was always the knee, because then you had more body to bash. And she said, oh, okay. And she was a little bit shocked, but she was a decent human being. She really was a lovely person. And she went to the principal, and I stood in that office and I heard my mother on the other end of the phone, and I was 15 years old, say she has weird sexual tastes. It must have been her boyfriend. I didn't have a boyfriend. I didn't have a life.
Wow.
I didn't have a social life.
She was just this incredible, charming fox.
Yeah, she was, yes. And she was pretty. She was an attractive woman. She knew how to speak to people. She was very charismatic, often. when she wanted to be. She won Miss Illawarra at 15 or something. So she wasn't down on the beach. She just landed at the beach and they said, hey, do you want to come up to this beauty pageant? And she won it. So she wasn't a 4
She knew how to manipulate people.
Absolutely, she did. Yeah. Men, especially.
Men.
Yeah.
That stupid docks worker. One of them. So, no wonder you were furious at the age of 16 that you didn't have your own rights, because you hadn't had a voice all this time.
No.
Finally, you were free from her, and you still didn't have a voice.
No, but I wasn't free from her.
Exactly, right?
One of her friends said to me once, when you leave home, because I know what she's doing, when you leave home, come and see me. So I did. And she helped me get a little flat and a job. And my mother found out where I was working and went and told my boss a whole stack of stories that just weren't true, just not even vaguely true. I was a thief and a liar. I worked as a prostitute. I was a drug addict. Evidently, none of this was true.
Yeah.
And that I would steal from him. So I went to work one day and didn't have a job because she'd convinced him that this is who I was.
A mother who's actively sabotaging you.
Yep.
So when this happened with your brother, there was so much, incredible psychological abuse under the bridge. This would have just, I mean, you'd be at capacity and then more happens.
Yeah. I went into 17 and a half, I went into DY Doc's office and I tried to explain the situation. Please get my brother some help. And I think there's something wrong with you, dear. You need help. I wouldn't listen. Nobody would listen. No one listened.
And
I told my
tried.
grandparents. I told my uncle. I asked my uncle within days of me moving out. I said to him, please look out for my brother. Please look out for him because I don't know if he can survive. He's too young.
Do you think any of these adults reflected on that and actually have a conscience?
No.
Why?
Because I've confronted my uncle about it many times. He doesn't care.
He doesn't care?
No.
Oof. And I guess you were reluctant to confront your grandma?
No. I was reluctant to do a damn thing.
Fair. And her response?
Don't forget that's my daughter. I said, I realise, but your grandson's dead.
Who just killed your grandson? Oh, darn.
So no.
And did heads roll at Doc's?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, big changes. Which
so what were the changes?
Up. Anybody can look up.
Yeah, so, what was the legislation changes that came from this?
Well, I don't know if they were legislation changes, but they were changes.
Policies.
Procedures, policies.
Sure.
All Doc's officers had to communicate.
Across different departments? Yeah.
To each other.
Yeah.
Your record had to follow you. Yep. It could not be destroyed.
Yep.
And 2 by 2. Not do as you damn well please.
Yep.
That had to happen.
Yep.
And then they realised, and this went all the way through the community, that no, if you're white and you're educated, you are still capable of the most horrible things. And things began to unravel and change. The community where he died got a little action group together and asked for my permission to follow things up. I was interviewed by somebody from a TV program, a current affair type TV program, and he said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, I just want to get up tomorrow morning and just live a normal life. And so he said, and what's a normal life? And I said, get up in the morning, have my breakfast, and just get on with my day with no drama. And he said, that's exactly what I wanted. My mother was an alcoholic.
Oh, wow.
And I had to look after her. And she was abusive. And so I didn't know. And I said, look, he said to me, you tell me your story. And I said, no, I'm not telling you my story, because my story is just a story to you. It's to make money. I said, this needs to change. What happened to him needs to change. Have a look at the newspaper. This will never happen in Australia. Only a short while ago. And it has. Look at it. It has. In the most horrible way. I said, there's children everywhere behind closed doors living like this. I said, it's horrendous. This needs to change. It's got to be changed. And I said, I handed over the electricity letters, and I said, look, this is proof of this, because they all require proof. I said, something's got to change. So Nick Greiner immediately changed things. He threw a lot of money into Docs, because the usual thing is that Docs has no money, we can't afford it, we can't do this, we can't do that, we're screaming out for help, we're screaming out for education. But the basic premise was wrong. Their little boxes that they ticked were wrong. You don't have to be anything specifically on the outside. The monster is on the inside. It doesn't necessarily look like an unpleasant thing on the outside. And so that changed. It was disappointing that 12 months later, money was not continually being given to the welfare system, but things had changed. All the officers had to speak to each other in the different areas, so your record went with you. It became the department's property, not the individual Docs officers or officer.
So transparency, accountability.
Yeah, all of that came into it. And then Docs was then put under strain again, because monies were withdrawn, funneled into something else. I've no doubt, I don't know. And I read that, and it was extremely disappointing, but a lot had changed. A lot had changed. So the community of Woolloomooloo were all grieving, because they tried so hard to ring Docs, ring the police, ring the schools, ring everybody, try and do something, because they knew he was suffering.
So this is before he passed. Other
Yes.
people were trying to
Within
put
the
up
2
the red
years.
flag.
Oh yeah, 2 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And when I was at home, our Scottish neighbour rang Docs lots of times, but Mr. Spratt was still around, pulling the strings. So nothing ever happened. But once she got her transfer into the city from out west, and I lost contact with them, things changed. And there were 40 visits in 2 years to try and save him, and they failed every single time because of their little boxes. Everything I tried to do was completely unsuccessful. It didn't matter how many times I put myself on the line to try and change things. It didn't matter what I said to people, my own family, the police, authorities. One policewoman said, if you run away from home again, she said, I'll put you straight in a girls' home. So I ran away from home. I went straight to that police station. I asked for her name, and I said, right, run away from home, put me in a girls' home.
Please. Yeah, I mean, that says everything, doesn't it?
Yep, she ignored me.
Oh, gosh.
Fabulous. So...
I love the fighting spirit that you had. I don't know where you got it from, because it wasn't beaten out of you.
It was beaten into me.
It's beaten into you.
Yeah. Yep.
Fair enough. Had to survive yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Survival.
Right. Yep.
And the only way I could survive what happened with my brother. Now, the week before he died, my mother had always grown chocos, and she grew these chocos and she was almost obsessed by them. And they grew over the fence, because it was a townhouse, this particular place. Grew over the fence. And the neighbour was perfectly, had every right to trim them, because they were out of control. And she would cause such a kerfuffle over it, it just wasn't worth it. And so he trained them to go over the communal carports at the back of the buildings. And so they were just running wild over the top of these roofs of this communal car.
So this is the choco. This is a vegetable vine. Yep.
And he said to some boys that were living around there, roughly 8-year-olds themselves, 10-year-olds, 2 or 3 of them, he said to them, grab some buckets, kids, get up on that roof at that where the carport is, he said, and help yourself, because they're just sitting up there. So the kids ran home, got buckets, and away they went. And she pulled out an air rifle she'd had for years and shot them.
Far out. She shot the children?
Shot the children.
With an air rifle?
With an air rifle that she'd been keeping in the roof.
For picking chocos that were on the other side of the fence?
Other side of the fence and over a bit, yes.
Says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure does.
Over chocos?
Over chocos.
Wow.
So then the police arrived, as they would, and they found a black altar. Now, I had no idea that witchcraft was illegal, but in 1982, May the 10th, 1982, thereabouts, witchcraft was illegal. So she got in a bit of trouble for that. They confiscated the black altar. She got charged. And my brother was dead within the week. Because she'd figured, as far as I can work out, that she would lose him.
So...
If she goes to prison, where's he going? To his father's. She wasn't going to have that.
So you think that's why she did it?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's horrendous.
Yep.
Oh, that's just devastating. Ridiculous.
Yep.
Logical for you to make that deduction there.
Yep.
Because, I mean, you'd be wondering why. And I guess when you heard that a week earlier and you heard about the charges...
I read it in the paper.
Yeah.
I read it in the paper, and Malcolm and I, my partner at the time, he read it to me. He was having coffee. I was cooking breakfast. He'd gone and got the paper. He read this to me. He said, oh, look, it's page 8 or 10 or something like that. And he read it to me, and I said, it sounds like something my mother would do.
And it was her?
And it was her.
Far out.
So, no names. No area, specific area. Just the article about what had happened. I said, oh, it sounds like something my mother would do. And he said, oh, I don't think so. And I said, yeah, you got no idea how bad she is.
Well, surely he did. Your brother was dead.
A week after that.
A week after? Oh, so this actually went to the paper a week before?
Yeah.
I assumed it was afterwards.
No.
And it was her? I'm with you. All right, you knew your mother that well. So, darling, let's come up to a bit more fast forward in time. So, what happened to your mother?
Oh, she went to prison?
Yeah, as in sort of mental health prison.
Yes, I'd say so.
Yeah,
she lived in I think they called it a house within the prison. Yeah, down there at Mullawa. Part A section of the women's prison. I was living in Glen Innes, way out the back of Glen Innes somewhere. It's probably a different suburb somewhere. Because I'd gone to live on a commune just to get away.
Fair enough.
I just needed everything to stop.
Yeah, get away from all the media and...
I couldn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. I just didn't see any reason. Why am I even here? Like, I don't have a future. What do I do next? I had no advice. I had no family support. I had nothing. So off we went to live on a commune. And anyway, think I was probably there about 8-10 months.
Mm.
And I'd light the fire outside and just fall asleep under the stars looking at the sky. There's no ceiling above my face.
Mm.
There's no constraints. And that was the cure.
I love that you did that. You went and took yourself away and just gave yourself space to breathe and heal.
That was the cure. I didn't want to hear about it anymore.
Mm.
I didn't want to hear about what was going on in the uncivilised world. I just couldn't cop it anymore. I couldn't do any more. There was nothing left.
No, you'd fought and you didn't have a voice. So then did your mother pass away? Is she still alive?
Is it possible? I don't know.
Don't
10
know.
years ago she was still alive.
Right.
I can go to parole and, what is it, something in parole and office, and find out whether or not she's dead or alive because she committed a capital crime. So that's all I can find out. So I did that before I came to Queensland. She was alive then, I don't know about now. As she was getting out of prison...
What do you mean, as she was getting out of prison? Did she get out of prison?
Yeah. No, she only did, I think, around about 3 years.
What?
2 years, 8 months, yeah.
Why?
Oh, it was her mental condition,
Are you kidding me? I assume she was in jail this whole time.
No.
Oh my gosh.
So Mr. Spratt, my favourite person in the entire world.
Who is that?
That's the docs officer.
Oh, yep.
That,
the affair one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He kept ringing my grandmother to see if my grandmother would look after her. And my grandmother rang me and said, look, I'm getting all these phone calls. I don't want them. I said, give me his number. So I rang him and I said, Grandma doesn't want you to ring her anymore. She's had enough. She's on her own. She doesn't want to look after Patricia. None of us do. Because she plays with matches. So just get lost. Oh, but after everything she did for you. And I said, here, listen here, mate. Because I don't think he even dreamed.
But his job was to know what was happening in that home.
That he kept in touch with her all this time. He didn't seem to think that anything was his fault. It was almost like it was his right to do what he did. And just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right, you know? And I said, look, he said, oh, well, you look after her after everything she's done for you. I said, done for me? Are you kidding?
So you set him straight?
Yep.
Good. Don't think he probably took
that
on board, though.
She's not safe. You can't have her around children. I've got children.
Yeah. So did he end up connecting with her? You don't know.
He must have done. He must have been in contact with her all that time. And that was the last I heard of her. My uncle chased it up a few times through the Salvos, but she had said to the Salvation Army she didn't want to be found. But I wasn't interested. I just needed to get on with my life.
Well, let's hope there was someone with authority who kept tabs on her in the community for her mental health and to protect people. Let's just hope.
She has to, because of the crime she committed.
She's obliged to.
The police have to know where she is all the time.
Okay.
So they have to know where she's living. Hence,
you can know if she's alive or dead.
Yeah.
Okay. Whoa, that's huge. That's absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of media around all of this.
Oh yeah, it was for years. It went on for years. There's still people writing about it now.
Because of the impact on the docs' policies and procedures that came through, and the atrocity of what happened, obviously.
Yes.
And you mentioned when we sat down a moment ago that there was someone who was writing misinformation and making a career out of all sorts of lies, and you only discovered that more recently.
Yeah, I think it was 11 years ago. I decided to punch my brother's name into the internet.
Yep.
Because I thought, it's about time I sort of got in touch with all of this. My kids had left home. I got some peace and quiet.
Yeah.
I'm no longer spending 10 hours a day at work.
Sure. So you type in Paul Montcalm.
Montcalm.
Montcalm, sorry.
And then Elspeth Brown's name came up.
Elizabeth Brown.
Elspeth.
Elspeth,
yeah.
Elspeth.
And she was retiring from Canberra, from being a lecturer at Canberra. And a lot of the things that she had said, I discovered were lies. She said that my mother had never been married. Well, my mother had been married 3 times. Her second marriage was annulled because she wasn't divorced properly from my father. So that didn't happen.
Was it just clerical errors that were wrong? Well, that's a very big clerical.
It's not a clerical error. She claimed somebody rang me when I was about 22 and said, "Oh, have you seen?" I think it was a Current Affair or one of those type shows. And I said, no, I was busy with the children, I think, at after school sports or something or other. No, they were only babies. I wasn't watching it. It was more likely the radio was on rather than the television. And I said, no. And I never caught up with it. And they said the lies are being said is absolutely revolting. And I remember standing there thinking, I can't do this again. I've saved myself now, and I feel like this black hole's just opening up. No. And I'm about to slide down it. And
you'd worked so hard to claw your way out of that. You needed to not go back. Absolutely.
Yeah. No brakes. There's no brakes on if I crawl into this hole. There's just no way.
Which can I say is why it's pretty significant that now at the age of 60 you're talking about this now. Hey, that's
it's about time.
It's not lost on me.
A friend of mine said to me, you don't have enough breath left in you if you don't do it now. She was right. I don't. And so I think it's time.
So you feel like it's quite important now to get that story out?
Yeah. My kids are grown up. They've got children of their own if they're having them. Because not all my kids have children or want to have them. They're all off having their own lives. So it's not going to impact on their development because they're grown adults. Mm-hmm. They're all around the age of 40. Mm-hmm. So I can revisit this in pieces if I like. Mm. Some of the people in the story will be dead. So I don't have to argue with them anymore.
And you've got distance, you're well and truly an adult now. You've got life distance, life experience. Yep. You're safe. Yeah. And now you can set the record straight. And and when I want to wrap up on this topic, if that's okay. Yeah. When we first spoke very briefly, you said you had to learn how to survive.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that before we go?
Yeah. When I was being asked, so he died, and it was a few days afterwards I had spoken to the arson squad, and all of that was out of the way, and I was faced with the residents at Woolloomooloo with many questions. They wanted many things from me. And I remember looking into their eyes and thinking, I can't get swallowed up by these people. This is going to swallow me whole, and I don't know if I'm going to survive. I need to survive. And they wanted to form a little group and raise money for my brother's funeral. And I thought, yeah, okay, what's this going to look like down the track? All these people were mourning, and I don't think they were mourning just for my brother. I don't think any one of them rang docs and the police and everybody else they could think of because they'd never experienced something like that before. They had never seen it before. They were genuine people, horrified by what had happened. But you could see in some of them the pain that was their own personal pain.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
They'd experienced some horrors themselves.
Oh, okay. They could relate.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of people there that could relate. And this was their their way. They understood that this was huge and this had the potential to change things. And so it was an outlet for them too. And everybody was grieving.
So it was shared collective grief.
Everybody, the whole place was grieving. This horror had happened in their midst, and they had tried to stop it. So I said, sure, you can bury him. The guy that tried to save him gave me the plot that he's buried in. Now, the family had enough money to bury my brother. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that this is what they needed to do in order to grieve as well. They'd been a huge part of the last 2 years of my brother's life. They'd been a huge part of trying to save him. None of us could. It wasn't just me. None of us could. And the whole entire community couldn't save him.
Yeah. So when you say you had to learn to survive, you let them do that, but you had to have boundaries, and you had to go and you went off to the commune and you looked after yourself.
No, what I said to them was, what is it you need?
Yeah.
And they said, we need you to sign this, this and this. And so I went through all the paperwork and I said, okay, but his where he's buried belongs to me. And that's the end of it, because he is our family. So that's where I draw the line.
Yeah.
The church was packed, standing room only. People were outside because they couldn't get in. And that was an entire community that was in mourning. Had we made it a private affair, there would have been about 10 people there, if that.
And they were the people that didn't act.
They're the people that didn't act. So the community was able to mourn and move on, because that's really important. They fundraised for his funeral. They fundraised for a headstone a few years later. They asked if they could form an action group to do something about, getting child welfare and help push that along. I signed off on that. And I said, now that you've got what you want, I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore.
I'm incredibly, the word impressed is in my head, but it's not right. In awe of the fact that at that age you had the foresight, the knowledge to know what you needed to do, and the courage to stand up against a community, and instead of following their path, you took your own. I think that's incredible.
If I hadn't, I would have been destroyed.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done it. I just couldn't have done it.
Yeah. Well, tell you what, Chantelle, we better go. I cannot thank you enough.
You're welcome.
That was an honour to bring us into your world and to go through all of that history. Are you okay now? How are you now with what's it like now to be?
Well, I started writing a book.
Did you? What's it called, everyone? Chantelle's, do you have a title?
It's About Time.
It's About Time. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much for coming along. I really appreciate it. Truly.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. We'll keep talking, won't we?
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.